everyone, and welcome to a new JKL Media podcast about Severance Season 2. Today, we're going to talk about Episode 4, Woes Hollow. And I am joined by my lovely and talented co-hosts, Lou.
Hello.
I am here, though I'm not feeling blue, but I am blue.
Yep. And I am Red, although I'm not wearing my red lounger today. I'm wearing my black one. But I am the red component of this podcast. Wow. I gotta say right up front, this one is a doozy. You either would love this one or hate it, right? I feel like this might be a divisive episode, but overall, it seems like people were very happy with this episode, including me. I actually sent an email to both Jesse and Lou after I watched it, and I said, "Holy shit," in the subject line. And wow, it was crazy. So I want to get your overall impressions and then we'll jump in. So, Lou?
Yeah, this episode blew my mind. I don't think in my wildest dreams I could have dreamed up with what happened in this episode. Just getting out of the office was so off-putting that in a good way that everything that followed, I was just dumbfounded. And as Jesse had planted the seed in a previous episode about whether or not Hallie was being severed or not in the any world, this episode really pays that off and so quickly that a lot of times things like that, a thread like that would run for quite a long time, but this show is just progressing right through it, and that makes me excited because who knows where they're going to go from here. And but there's one thing that really pissed me off about this episode, and we'll get into that. And but it's not anything to do with how the episode was done or anything, but it's just the way a thing was played out that I don't like. And we'll get into that. But yeah, just a totally mind-blowing episode.
Cool. And just Jesse and I don't know what this thing is that Lou's
No, we
talking
do
about.
not.
So
I'm now excited.
I'm anticipating it greatly.
Yeah, me
Jesse,
too. Yeah, so when I got your email, I had not watched the episode yet. I was like, oh, okay, what this looks good. And one thing that this series does, I think, really is they don't take you where you think you're going to go. Like, I assumed this episode would be all about us seeing a flashback to him knowing both, like remembering both sides, right?
mm-hmm.
And
I don't
um,
think you were alone in that assumption.
and they didn't do that, so I have a lot of questions about, okay, where does it take more than one time of being reintegrated? Is it just a series of treatments? It isn't just one and done, because he's acting like he doesn't know his outie or any, and we're going to get more of it. If you go camping with someone who's really good at it, camping can be fun. It's just you have to, you're not good at it. And so having someone else set the tents and the fire pit and bring the marshmallows, even though talk about cruelty, that looks fun. Yeah, I love this episode a lot. And they keep showing scenes of snow and these big, vast shots of snow drifts and everything that you go. And by the way, we just did a bio break from our other podcast, and Linda asked what we are going to talk about now, and she says, that was too strange, all the whiteness everywhere. And she was just talking about The Office,
Right.
you know? So,
Yeah.
like, if I tried to make her watch this episode, she would go, what the hell is going on? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
great episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop my little thing in here. As someone who camping was a huge part of my life growing up, I would not go now as an older adult, but we went at least once a year growing up until I was long into high school. And wow, is really great if you know what you're doing. And my parents knew what they were doing. Salute to Big Trees National Forest because that's where we went every year and I loved it.
Yeah, I have one more thing to say about this episode.
Of course.
Worst team building exercise ever.
Oh my God, terrible. I know
Yes.
someone who's been part of team building exercises before. I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have been.
Yeah.
And I have questions about the logistics. So if you excuse me for a moment, your Audi shows up at work and you're told, hey, take off your clothes and put on these because you're about to go on a field trip. Your innie is going to go on a field trip.
Is
Well,
that what happened though? Were they
what,
not? No,
but
yeah, I get that.
because they showed up
Right,
in the wilderness,
right.
so do they have teleportation?
A lot of
Was this
logistical issues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was this all a virtual?
Was it cold?
Yeah, it was just in their
Mm,
mind. Because
Yep,
Irv said I could have froze to death.
because you never saw their breaths. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That
mm,
was the first thing that stood out to me. This is okay, this is supposed to be cold, but I don't see anybody's breath forming in the air. So,
Hmm.
again, was this
mm.
real or was this some sort of virtual
Projection.
reality thing?
Yeah.
Mm.
What an amazing location. I don't
Yeah.
know whoever
Oh,
found
yeah.
this spot to shoot, or if they created it totally digitally, I don't know, but what a fantastic location.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I wasn't a fan of the huge white swaths of just snow, but man, that waterfall, the cave, just gorgeous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the largest waterfall in the world.
No,
Well, and there's
they don't know any different.
yeah,
So
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
What
But
is
doesn't everybody know what the biggest waterfall in the world is?
no, because
Oh,
remember they know there's a
oh,
sky, but
right,
they don't know
right.
what the sky looks like,
Because
right?
they're innocents.
so
Hmm.
Milchek can say whatever he wants.
He often does.
Oh,
Right.
I hate him so much.
I think he's working under a certain amount of pressure too.
I agree. I do
Yeah.
have to say the actor is amazing. I
Oh,
love it.
he plays the great villain.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
and it
so
and as
go
I
ahead.
said before, but when they interview the actor and his face and mouth and eyes match, it's because as Milchek, his eyes never change.
And
Yeah,
I think that's an important part of his character because he is the ultimate unreliable narrator, right?
said.
Just completely unreliable in anything he says. And so not seeing what his eyes are conveying is a big deal. And I think
Yeah,
that actor does a great job of that.
yeah, I
Yep.
do too.
Good morning,
Um,
innies.
Yeah.
goodness, crazy. Okay, so I want to put right here at the beginning, the episode received widespread critical acclaim, with critics praising the episode's uniqueness, performances, particularly by John Turturro and Britt Lower, direction, and climax. I love episodes that do this, that really jerk you out of your comfort zone. We're already conditioned to either see them in their Audi location or their any location, and we hardly ever see anything different. Taking them out of both environments is incredibly disconcerting to see. And so we don't expect anything. And so everything they do is a surprise. They're all in character, but it's still something that we don't expect because it's a different story. They've taken these people out of their environments and we see them differently. Do you guys have any quick thoughts about that?
Luke, you want to
Yeah,
About taking them, yeah.
it's very disconcerting, and you're as soon as they do that, you're going, okay, what's going to happen now? I have no clue, and that is, because we all watch a lot of TV movies. A lot of times we can predict where a storyline is going to go, but in this one, you just have no clue, really.
Mhm.
And they're doing things that normally shows raise something and they hold on to it till the very last scene of the final episode of the season. This one just says, nope, this is this, and now we're raising a whole bunch of other new questions. Yeah, just really a very bold choice.
And one of the things that I love when a series asks questions, answer them, and gives you more questions.
Yep.
This show has it doesn't feel rushed, but it is okay. You're curious. There's been a lot of discussion. You guys, that one thing we're going to show you, yep, that's true. But what else? He already knows, yes, his wife's alive. Yes, Haley in Helena. Just there's keeps on and on the story moving forward. And I did not have snowy team building exercise on my bingo card.
Okay, and here's what I'm going to do for this episode. I'm going to bring up little points and I want you guys to chime in and then we'll talk in length about it. So you already brought this up, Jesse, that the last episode ended with Mark going through a procedure, or at least starting the procedure to be unsevered. And we saw that he actually vacillated between the two and saw things from the other perspective. So it looked like he was to become unsevered. And then we get this one where he's definitely not unsevered. Unsevered. So do you guys have any thoughts on what's going on there? Was this something that was done before this procedure or what?
I think that the mere fact of when he goes from his outie world into the innie world and they do the switch, I think that might undo the reintegration that Regaby is doing, because it's resetting him into the innie personality where she was doing the reintegration with the outie personality. So I think the switch itself knocks down whatever reintegration she's done, and that's why it probably takes more than one reintegration session for it to be totally successful.
Okay.
That's my theory.
I think that outie Mark will now remember innie Mark's things, but innie Mark won't remember outie Mark's thoughts.
So he's integrated in the outside world, but not
Yes.
inside Lumen.
Yeah. Which would make for a very interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's no way outie Mark would have got nasty in the tent in the sleeping bag
Right.
because he still loves his wife.
Right.
And
exactly.
adore. So and then I got to thinking, is this a time backwards, right? But then by the ending, this feels quote unquote real time. Why? Because of the reveal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea, Jesse, to return the compliment to you that innie Mark doesn't remember outie Mark, but outie Mark can remember innie Mark. Because if innie Mark could remember outie Mark, then the show would pretty well be over, I think, once you remove that barrier. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because if you remember, Petey quit. So he was not coming back.
Right.
So
we don't know whether that would have been.
And so I'm going to put my money on that's the role they're going to go to. And I think that makes you really interesting because outie Mark is now going to go, how do I communicate to innie Mark? Because it's a one-way conversation. I know what happens with innie, but innie isn't going to know what I do.
Yeah. You guys. I was stymied. I'm glad you guys were talking about it because I feel like this is me understanding it a little better. No, exactly. I couldn't fix it in my brain because I knew it wasn't going before he had the procedure, but I knew that there was something different.
Exactly.
You guys clarified that for me a little bit. And I know they're just theories, but there has to be something going on that contradicts one or the other of those things.
I'll wait till we talk about Helly. Then I have questions.
I'm going to talk about her for a second here.
Okay.
The one thing that people have criticism about is and I think it's been blown a little out of proportion, but the whole idea of consent, informed consent, because Mark isn't consenting to have relations with Helena. He is consenting to have relations with Helly. And one would think that since those are two different people, they stress in this show, your innie and your outie are two different people. And we do get the reveal later in this episode that, and I'm assuming this is what they reveal, that the innie Helly was actually Helena. And I think we also got a mix of what we had talked about. She was still severed, but they had switched places. What did you do you guys think there's anything to that? What fans are saying, I don't think it has anything to do with the story overall, but what do you guys think about that? I think it's relevant that we talk about it because it's been discussed in several publications.
I think there's a sound point there because Mark thought he was having a relationship with any Helen or Helly. So it depends on how dark you think the show's going to go, but it seems right now that Helena has a goal in mind. Whether maybe what she's doing is related to Cold Harbor. That's probably the most cynical viewpoint, and it seems to line up with her character best. The romantic in me wants to think that she's actually falling in truly in love with Mark, and so that she's acting outside of her comfort zone when she's doing this. But the fact that she's going in unsevered gives more credence to the prior theory that she's doing something in the name of the Egan family, which makes her character very hard to like. And I've talked about this before that I guess I'm hoping that somehow any Heli will really subconsciously work on outer Helena and make the two merge into a new personality, I guess is what I'm hoping for at this point. But right now, she's a pretty predatory character.
Yeah, make a better Helena.
Yeah.
So what I love about this is to the Lumen Corporation, innies are tools. They are not people. If you remember, Helena said that you aren't a person in that recording. These are tools, they're robots, they're slaves, whatever what you want to call them. So they don't think they have any rights.
I think Helena thinks that, but I don't think the Ennies think that.
No, Lumen thinks that as a whole.
Right.
So Helena and the Lumen doesn't think there's anything wrong with this.
So that's even worse.
Yes.
That means that she's using Mark.
And I do believe, because we've established and that it appears she is in a very cold, unloving relationship, like her sit there, her dad, called her, what was it?
Stinky
Basically,
child.
yeah, and just was horrible to her.
React.
And that's why you could make two arguments. You could say the reason she kept watching the tape is so that she could learn her character. But is the reason she keeps watching that tape is because, oh my goodness, here's someone that my innie cares about, and someone cares about me.
Yeah.
And I want to feel what it's like to be loved. I want to feel, it is similar to the dollhouse of, a few years ago. We had a little bit of this thought of, are these real people? So I'm fascinated because there is a cult to the Lumen, right? They have a whole mythos.
I would assume that the majority of Lumen employees are not severed.
But this is if Ontology, right, was created by a science fiction writer, actually was a huge corporation.
It is.
Yeah, that you do this. I think it's fascinating. And my nitpick is, okay, they showed us she couldn't find the on switch on the computer.
Helena.
How did Helena know the numbers right away?
Exactly.
That's like, how could she have done that? Or did she just fake it, right?
We had theorized that she is now completely unsevered, but now that's not the case. She is severed.
They turned off the switch somehow that when she went in the elevator.
So she's always her.
So I'll ask you two, is Helly, is this her first memory from when she was captured? She was on stage, she was screaming, and is it her next memory at this river being drowned?
I assume so.
Okay, that's what I thought too.
Because why would she become an innie after that?
Yeah, That's the way it seemed to play out to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, right?
Huge implications on her actions over the last
Yeah.
4 episodes. And I have to agree with you. I don't like that encounter looking back on it where they had sex.
Mark
Okay. So Mark is
Twitter pated.
he does yeah, and he doesn't understand what's happening. Lou, tell me about your net now.
It's not it. It's just I just don't understand what the happened to the character in this episode. He was like Irving was calling it straight on. He says you're making love with your eyes, and he's all like, ooh, and he goes into the tent and closes the zipper. He just had one thing on his mind, and I don't think that's the Mark that we were presented with in the previous episodes. That Mark was sensitive to all the other characters' needs and fears and whatnot. Yet in this one, he's just like a love-struck idiot. And
Yeah.
I just thought it was, I don't, I believe the show is too good to use that a cheap out to get his character this way. So what I'm trying to rationalize it is that they're showing that this is why Mark got severed in the first place, because when he falls in love hard.
Yeah.
So that's my rationalization. At least I hope that's the way it's going to play out. But I was really annoyed with the way he acted in this episode. And the only good thing is I can't wait to see how he's going to respond in the next episode now that he knows what was going on with Helen and Helena.
Yeah, and that may be part of the story. And
Maybe.
could he have been damaged somehow by the procedure where his innie isn't acting right? Jesse, what about you?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Is there hormones in the air, hormones they're doing? I feel like this is convention, Mark. I will tell a fun story. There are people that lose their mind when at companies I was at, they would send people to Manila and you're in another country and people will lose their minds. Happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas,
Stays in
right?
Vegas, yep.
So I don't know if that was just his mindset that he finally felt this attraction and couldn't resist it. But I think it's a fair criticism, Lou, that it does seem like a little unlike any Mark. Any Mark is caring and thought, and he knows that Auntie Mark is married. And so would he do that? I don't know. I think it certainly moves the story along, but I don't know if this was the right thing or not. Did they serve this character right the long way? I trust the storytellers that this will end up being used in a nice way. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So,
I hadn't either. I was just like, oh, okay.
So now I really hope they address it, that there's some reason he was fixated on Helly in this episode, because that's what it was. He was fixated on her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Irving the whole way through.
Irving was going to get in his way of being with Helly. Was it just that they were outside the office now? Did it have some kind of external impetus? Please, let's find out more.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, what did you guys think about the fact that they are doing this, Bo?
Yep.
The whole convenience of it, the outdoor retreat and team building occurrence, ORTBO, that their Audis authorized. Number one, do you think their Audis really authorized it? Do you think their Audis know anything about it?
Based on what's happened previously? No.
Same.
Because he's lied to them multiple times.
Exactly.
Yeah, he lies to them all the time.
Yeah.
Talk about an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate unreliable narrator. And you can't, there is no way for them to determine that he's lying to them.
Exactly.
And because they can't remember and they can't hear other things. Yeah, they have to. Yeah.
And I feel like they know better, right?
Yeah.
They don't trust them.
In a lot of ways, they're children.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And they were born the day that they became severed. So they're pretty young. 3 or
Yeah,
4 years old.
exactly.
Right?
No, I've already said my piece.
Okay. I want to talk about Irving for sure. Irving was our simulacrum, right? He was our meta viewer. I feel like he is telling us the biggest story in this episode, and the arc that he went through just in this one episode, I think it proves how good an actor John Turturro is.
He's the
Uh,
MVP of the episode for sure.
I agree. And you see his frustration, you see his absolute certainty in what is going on. Um,
The Night Gardener.
yeah,
That.
he has had drop-ins. This is not out of the blue for him
Yeah.
because he has said things to Dylan. Hey, what does she mean about the night gardener? What is that about? I really loved him in this episode. I like Irving as a character already. And to see this, and it's hackneyed, but this tour de force of John Turturro in this one episode, wow. I was blown away by him and the things that he did.
Same here.
And I want your views on that. If you have any particular moments, go for it.
Jesse, why don't you go first this time? You're muted,
Irving
Jesse.
is,
Oh,
yeah, Irving is a true believer. This is out of everyone on our four main innies. He drank the Kool-Aid. He is a true believer. And he talked about, oh, we should go to the perpetual shrine or whatever they called it. He talked about all the artwork with Bert. And he truly believes in the Lumen mythos. And to see him lose that follower's rose-colored glasses and become aware of what's happening is fascinating to watch. Yeah, when you think about it, John Turturro has had this brilliant career. I remember him in Quiz
Quiz
Show.
show, yeah, big time.
Yeah, he played in the Batman, Carmine Falcone.
Yeah.
He just is this wonderful character actor. And to have him play this is heartbreaking. And to give up his beliefs in service to the person that he thinks be this other person was amazing. So I just loved his journey in this. And that scene where at the end where Milchek is furious, right? He is just livid, and you are fired. You are gone. You will be banished. And Irving just has this look of, I don't care. I've done the right thing, and therefore nothing you can say or do is going to make me be unhappy because I've done the right thing and did what I needed to do. I agree with you. I loved his performance and the storyline.
yeah, he's a consummate actor for sure. He makes you go across a whole range of emotions. I just love like we just said, I'm on the fucking ice.
Yeah, that's so
Good stuff.
great.
But the Irving character is very perceptive, and like Jesse said, he's a true believer, but he's not. He doesn't have the wool pulled over his eyes. Like he sees the world, and I think it's interesting that somebody who's just had their heart broken. I think when you're in that kind of state, you notice other people who are in successful or happy relationships, and you can't help but feel a little bit jealous. And I do think there's a kernel of that in his attacks on Helly or Helena, I should say, about what she's doing. But he is a bit of a fanatic too. Like I guess you could say he's got a bit of an OCD thing. Like when he talked about eating that, I think it was a seal, but I think it was a messed up clone, to be honest. But his journey was very poignant. And like when he had that hallucination about being in his office and Bert pulls down the partition, that was heartbreaking too. And what a beautiful scene. And Christopher Walken doesn't have to say anything either. It's all in the eyes and the expressions of the two characters. That's just a beautiful thing. I don't want to talk too much about his interactions with Helly, but he's able to deduce through his perceptions, and he's a smart guy, that only an Audi that had the pull of somebody very important could get their Audi into the innie floor without being severed. And when he makes the declaration at the near the climax of the episode that she's an Egan, it didn't seem. I thought that that was a fantastic bit of character building and writing, and that's got to be one of the most, like, we've all seen death scenes for characters, but that has to be one of the most, in a way, heartbreaking yet clinical terminations of a character if he is indeed terminated permanently that we've seen since maybe 2001 when Hal shuts down the hibernation chambers on the astronauts and all their life signs go flat. This was in that same vein for me, or had the same vibe, and that was just a really powerful moment.
It was filmed at Minnewaska State Park Preserve,
Mm.
and Awasting Falls was the waterfall. It took 4 or 5 weeks to film, and due to the amount of daylight the scenes required, the crew was racing against the sun every day. Turturro and Britt Lower, who plays Helly/Helena, considered the part where Irving tries to drown Helena difficult, with Turturro stating, "You want to do all the emotional stuff and also take care of the other person at the same time and make sure the other person is safe and you're not hurting them," and stuff like that. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit about where and all that kind of thing. Okay, so yeah, you covered Irving's little hallucination. I also want to talk about the doppelgangers. I think that the drowning in the lake is a contradiction to that, but that doesn't mean it's not like on some sort of technological soundstage or something. But are these things really standing there? Are they just figments? Are they projections? What are they? Are they clones? And if they're clones, that has a big implication that they actually have clones of these four Ennies already. Just quick go around. Do you guys have thoughts on those doppelgangers?
Jesse's brought this up in the previous episode about whether there were clones to begin with. So maybe my perceptions of how I viewed this episode are colored by that. But I do think that the quote unquote seal, I think that was a clue that there are clones. So my thoughts right now are leaning towards those duplicates of the four characters are clones. And I think I'm maybe strengthened by the fact that all of them seemed a little bit off. They didn't quite match perfectly the characters that they were twins of. So there may be cloning, but it looks like the process isn't perfected yet, is where I'm leaning to right now. And it's interesting how this whole cloning thing is tied into the Kier and Dieter story from the fourth appendix as well. And is that book really a fiction dealing with the fact that Dieter or Kier was experimenting with cloning? I'm not sure. And then you have the four woes that you're trying to figure out how they fit into it as well. Or the four furies, I should say. Sorry.
Tempers.
Tempers, yes. But that's where I'm sitting at right now. I do think it's clones, but I do think the cloning process is not perfected yet.
They were actually played by different actors.
Interesting.
Okay, Jesse, what about you?
So I assumed they were projections, right? In my case, so now then I'm thinking are they clones, right? And then you go, what do they do with the clones afterwards? But I'm thinking of the Watchmen, right, where they clone the dogs, the pets, and there was that where you went, oh, it doesn't quite match, and so they recycle,
Right.
which was incredibly, I was very worried. So once again, I don't have an answer for that. And it appears that at least the drowning part, which, by the way, how scary would that be, right? If you're the
Yep.
actor, because you've got to, and I realize that I'm sure there, because you see her face in the water. So it's not a stunt double,
Right.
though I'm sure there might be that the person holding it is when you see it from the Irvings from the outside, that's a stunt double. Yeah.
He
Oh, wow.
actually, yep.
Wow. I really am curious where that's going to go. Nope,
That's the
got
beauty
nothing
of
else.
this, of
Yeah,
talking about this,
yeah,
because man, we pick up lots of different things to
yeah,
consider, and I love it. Seeing from,
yeah.
I thought they were failed clones as well,
Oh,
clones
okay.
that just weren't right. And I do think that the seal was the tip off to us that maybe the
Okay.
seal was a very failed experiment
Yeah.
in cloning.
So why it's out there is another question.
Exactly. But is that a simulacrum for, and I keep using that word, for Kier's quote unquote twin, that his twin wasn't perfect?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
was that kind of cluing us into that as well? Dieter.
Dieter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about that, by the way. The whole purpose of this outing was to get them more entrenched in the lore of Kier,
yes.
right? And I hope I don't offend anybody with this, but I think the Bible is a work of fiction meant to teach us morality, like Aesop's fables kind of thing. I do think that it is mostly made up of storytelling in order to give us a baseline for how we're supposed to live our life, at least from that perspective. I think that this is a similar thing happening, that Kier is very much, I think he might have been a sociopath. And so he finds himself to be the most important, the center of the universe. And this story kind of makes you feel that way. The way he talks about his twin in the book, the things that the twin has done to quote unquote die. And I do think that, I don't know if Kier understands that or understood that about himself, but I do think that Milchek's response to their mirth over the whole he was masturbating and that's why he was killed thing, I don't know. I do think that Milchek buys into it, and that completely enraged him. And I want to know what the whole, I get that the point is that they're dragging them deeper into Lumen lore, but what that effect is going to have on our innies moving forward.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I tend to just not pay a lot of attention to, the lore part of it, and I may be missing that. I know, like we've talked about before, there was a whole with Lost, right? Everything about this, the corporation and all this behind. And I was reading in Wikipedia and they talked about this whole history of the founder. And I was like, when did they cover this in the show? So I was just going, why do I need to know this? This is very cultish. Yeah, I'll be careful now here. I think that I have had different people on the Set Listing Bruce podcast, different people who are spiritual leaders when we're talking about music. And most of them that I tend to agree with are the Bible was written by people, and you have to look in the context of the times when they were writing it. And as we change, the stories of the change, but there are fundamentalists who believe that every word in the Bible was literally dictated by God, and if you try to point out discrepancies, they go, oh, that's the devil talking to you,
Right.
which frustrates me a little bit.
Mm.
So yes, I do think this is a biblical text. And my favorite, uh, one of my favorite sayings is, I think the other son on the prodigal son had a point. hey, Dad, I've been here all along.
Yep,
I've done everything right. I didn't go piss away a fortune. I'm the good son. And when did you? I'm sitting over here, and now then you're throwing all these things because he's come back. How about a little? I'm glad he's back too, but how about a little love for me that never
exactly.
disappointed you? Just yes, exactly.
So what about you, Lou?
Yeah, I think the all these texts and everything are just a way to keep the viewers guessing about what's straight and what's not. I do think that there's a Cain and Abel aspect to the Dieter Brock, Kier Dieter story, but I think it's more symbolic than factual. Um, I think it's been prettied up with fancy allegories and whatnot. So I don't take it as literal true fact. I just think it's embellishments on whatever this Cure character. And you wonder who did he write all these things, or did he get somebody to do it? It's hard to say, but like this whole episode, this whole team building exercise, it all seems like a simulation to try to create a certain response from the main innies. Even the way the book is, they find it in that cave on that little ledge with a light above it. Like that just doesn't seem real. So there's aspects of this episode where you're thinking, okay, this could be they could really be there. But then there's other things, like I mentioned before, you never see anybody's breath in the air. And if it's cold, you definitely should. When we see
You know,
fake snow, it just takes us out of the scene.
one of the things that they will bring up often in the Hallmark podcast, right, is that on these Hallmark movies, there's snow and it's just so clear that it's fake or digital.
Yeah.
Um, I
So,
am particularly irritated by that kind of thing.
yeah. So I don't know
I
if I've really answered your question, Karen, but I guess my bottom line right now is I'm still up in the air about all that stuff.
okay. So how would you feel about doing a Kier episode? Like going back in time and learning about him?
Ooh, that's a tough question. My instant response would be, yeah, I want to see that. But I think if they did that, it would take a lot of the mystery out of the show. So it would have to
Right.
be something done much later, like maybe near, I would almost think it would be like, if not in the finale, at least in the penultimate episode, that we would get that kind of a reveal. I certainly don't think it would be wise to do it soon.
How about you, Jesse?
Once again, I'm thinking of the next to last Lost episode where they get Allison Janney plays the mom, and we get the story of the two sons, and everyone was furious that when we wanted everything, and why are you giving this now? Of course, anytime I can have Allison Janney on my TV, I'm happy.
Oh, she's
She is a gift, whether she's playing the mom and I, Tanya, whether she's
that was
doing
surprisingly good, by the way.
Mom, where, which I think is a series that dealt with addiction as strong as anyone ever has. And then, of course, her on West Wing. Love me some Allison Janney. If they did a one-off, like a documentary that's set in that world that kind of explained it, I would watch that as supplement. If they did a YouTube special, like a 15, 20
Webisode.
minute, yeah, episode of showing the history, I'd be into it. Yeah.
Do you think he's just a couple generations back, or do you think he's further back than that?
It's seems squishy to me because
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
he seems to be interacting with recent modern technology, but then at other times it's like he's on a farm. It's hard to pin down at this point.
I
And
think that's
maybe
one
he's
of
a
the main.
composite of several ancestors or
Oh,
something. I don't know.
And once again, one of the things that was very cool about the Foundation TV series that was not in the book is the idea that they cloned the Emperor. So maybe there is some cloning involved with the head of Lumen.
and I do think that that might be something. I mean, we've brought that up before. That is Kier's consciousness being put into different bodies.
Yeah, it's
So
hard to say
there's that too.
because yeah, it's really confusing because they had all those wax figures of all those Egans as
Yep.
well. So I don't
Yep.
know.
Yeah, it does.
And I think that's a big part of this show too, is that they don't really explain what time it is. They have flip phones, they have modern conveniences, and then sometimes it's like they have cars that haven't evolved from the 80s.
Have DVD players that don't need to be plugged into the wall.
Exactly.
Yes, I did think that. I guess a
Right.
battery, right?
They do have portable,
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
so it could have big batteries or something.
I got a couple of things about her.
We're going to talk about Helly and Helena right
Okay,
now.
then I'll just wait till you set the
Okay,
table.
that's what I want to end with. Helly
No.
or Helena. Okay.
Dylan didn't have much to do in this episode. The only thing is that he said he was sorry to Irving before he was severed that or unsevered, that he's
Right.
sorry that he didn't believe him.
Yeah. And he also wanted to eat the seal. So
Yeah.
It was not Dylan.
Irving didn't.
No, he did.
They may not feed us. We're going to need this food later.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right?
okay. Okay. But Dylan did have a few little things. I was also a little disappointed that he didn't do much. But you can see why. The episode was full already.
Mhm.
So let's talk about Helly and Helena here. We've danced around it. This has huge implications moving forwards. And I think it's the biggest part of what came out of this episode. Even though I think Irving's going to have a lot to do, he's going to become unsevered, apparently, from what we can tell. And what implications does that have? Is he going to be put together with, what's her name, Miss Selvig? Are they going to work on the outside and all that stuff? So that's kind of stuff to keep in mind. It's nothing that we know a lot about, but we do learn a lot about Helly and Helena. Now, we had theorized that this was Helena, or was it not Helena? And I know I particularly want to hear Lou talk on this. Not that I don't want to hear you, Jesse, but Lou mentioned that he didn't want it to be Helena as the any. And I did agree with that at the time. And I still feel that way, that I don't like that it was her, but I do think it adds a lot of dimension to the story that now we have to look back and have that colored in a different way. And her storyline is crazy. And I think that where Milchek is an unreliable narrator, she is a crazy ass Banana Town crazy pants narrator. I can't put my finger on her now knowing that it was Helena. Did she study Helly? How could she act like that as an innie so convincingly to only alert Irving because Irving didn't understand the Night Gardener thing? That was her mistake, that one thing. And no one else thought anything about it. So I'm dancing around things here, but her whole storyline is confounding to me. And I think it's so interesting because there's a lot of implications. Why did she feel the need to go in? Is she being undercover? Is she just wanting some kind of connection? And it comes out that she has never told anyone, not even her parents, that she loved them because her parents were terrible people. And so this has a huge impact on her, and she becomes fixated on the fact that she has fallen in love with Chidi. I feel like that maybe that could be part of it, that she sees herself fall in love with someone. And if you guys want to be concise with your opinions, that's fine. If you want to be dancing like me, go for it. Who wants to go first here?
All right, thanks. Jesse hand waved me. I'll take the baton. Much of what I think of this episode was the seed that Jesse planted, that people were thinking that Helena was not being severed when she went into the innie world, and that turned out to be the case. And so I was waiting for clues to see if I could determine which person she was. And I think there was three big moments. The one when she started laughing about the story that Milchek read, that seemed very The other was when she went into Irving's tent and gave him the snow steel in case he was hungry. I thought that was out of character for Helly. It seemed like a very cruel joke. And then the other one was when she said that Irving, we all know that Irving has a very lonely life. Like I don't think Helly would say that. So those three things were the kind of set up the stage for me so that when it was revealed that, yeah, she was really Helena, I wasn't super surprised. And you could almost maybe make the case that when Mark zippered the tent shut and then she watched him do it, that her the way she watched it was, yeah, this is all going according to plan. Look, but maybe I am probably projecting quite a bit onto that particular moment.
It's reading things into things.
Yeah, episode specific because there are things I want to say outside of this character in the series as a whole. But those little moments were the beats I think that convinced me even before Irving made the proclamation that she was Helena, stood out to me as the fact that she was not who she was pretending to be. So I think that for Brett Lowry, this is what a fantastic acting opportunity this is. I think any actor would kill to be in such a complex role. We made a reference in our last Babylon 5 episode that there were one of the most unique love triangles we had ever seen was in Farscape. I think this one is almost up there at this point, depending on where they go with it. But right now, and if you just take it at the macro innie outing combined level, we just have like Mark, Miss Casey, and Helena. That's an interesting dynamic that's going on too. And we've seen so far that it seems like the innies and outies are able to think of themselves as distinctly separate entities, which is in itself an interesting concept. And I also think it shows that people are able to rationalize things any way they want in order to satisfy their baser needs. And I think that's also what happened with Mark in this episode. But keeping it back on Helena, she is a very complex character for sure. The hints that we saw in the previous episode where she was watching herself as Helly, well, I guess no, as Helena now. She kissed Mark. She was, at the time, I thought she was, because I wasn't convinced she was the outie version of herself. Now I'm looking at it and thinking back on it and saying she's just watching to see now how Mark is reacting to her. Um, but in the larger picture, I'm hoping still that somehow the inner Helly will change the outer Helena and make her a better person. But I don't know how they're going to resolve the triangle issue. That's another big question as well. Yeah, fascinating setup for these characters. And I'm sure that in the next episode, if I assume we're going to see the fallout from what happened here with Mark.
Anything though.
No, but that's the assumption I have to make right now.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty disappointed with Mark, especially any Mark. And we'll have to see if it's a wake-up call for him. Hopefully Irving's sacrifice, if it's a permanent one, was not in vain. And boy, what a role for Brett Lowry.
Right?
I can't wait to see where it goes.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's a great. The thought is it's hard for us to figure out. I want outing Mark to get his that we know she's alive and they seem to be happy. But I love any Mark and Helly. So you're like, wow, what do I do? I don't know what the right amount is. So I'm very curious of what's going to happen. And I also don't understand what is Helena's long-term goal, right? Is this she just, as we've speculated, she wasn't loved as a child, and therefore there's this other stuff going on with her? I don't know. But I'm fascinated by it, and I am looking forward to next week to see Helly back and her confusion, right? And also, you've got any Mark, hey, we slept together. So yeah, I really love where they left us on this. Like we have no idea what's the next step.
Where we're
It,
going next.
it almost seems like the ultimate behavioral change experiment in that can they take a man that was deeply in love with his wife and yet make him fall in love with somebody else.
Can you take someone who wasn't loved ever and turn her into someone who accepts love and gives love back?
Yeah, I think that's more going to be a happy accident because
Okay.
I do think that she's very driven to prove herself to her father, and I think that she's totally on this path to accomplish this Cold Harbor goal.
Hmm.
But we're hoping, or at least I'm hoping, that inner Helly is going to somehow mess things up for her, and she's actually going to get confused and fall in true love with Mark.
Which could be complicated as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so I did some research into this. It doesn't mean something to some level. And
I think that's a fair assumption to have. Huh.
right. And Milchek, when he is told by Helena to activate the Glasgow,
Contingency or something,
Block.
right?
yeah. Okay, that I fixated on that, the word Glasgow. And there's some things that come up that were in the first season and then also in real life. In the first season, Mark and Helly are looking on a computer screen and they say a list of system functions in regards to the innies. And they are beehive, branch transfer, clean slate, elephant, freeze frame, and Glasgow. There's lots of speculation on what those meant back in the day. And now we have gotten one of them, taking away the Glasgow block. The other ones have implications. Beehive, that has a lot to do with a collective consciousness kind of thing. Is there a way to connect several consciousnesses together? Branch transfer obviously is moving one any from one location to another. I'm assuming again, clean slate would be wiping them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Elephant has to do with memory. So would it be giving memories back? Freeze frame, which would be maybe stopping any brain function whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And then Glasgow, which would be now that we know it's a switch. And what that switch does, I'm not sure. Is it a switch to turn off their any? Is it a switch that flips them the other way? Is it a switch that I don't know? But
Yeah.
anyway, and there's also a Glasgow scale that has to do with coma patients. So and I see right here, I don't have anything else, but on the eye-opening scale, it's Glasgow scale 4 is opens eyes spontaneously, 3 opens eyes to voice, 2 opens eyes to pain, and 1 does not open eyes. Again, why would they use that unless it has meaning?
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts?
I definitely think it adds context and flavor to the show. Ultimately, it's like technobabble. It doesn't really affect the overall story. It's just a nice kind of set dressing thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I was glad you did the deep dive. Um,
You know me. That's my
yeah. Um,
usually to an irritating fault.
and they said Glasgow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which means gray, green, gray, blue, and hollow, respectively. We do get green, blue, hollow. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I was wondering if, like, Helsinki or something, is there a tie to that? Why that phrase? So, yeah, I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I don't know where it's going, but there's lots of little things they're planting here. The seal, the wording, the implication of there being a way to
Yeah.
do this outside of the Lumen facility.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you guys any follow-ups to it.
I don't, I just, I'm once again, they have made us, every time I think they're going to zing, they zag.
Yeah,
And that's not a bad
they
thing.
jump. It's something completely different.
Yeah, and so far I've just enjoyed the ride.
Oh yeah, me
Um,
too.
I do understand if people, I don't want to have to think that hard
I
for,
like thinking that hard.
hmm
What about you, Lou?
Yeah.
I think the
Real
big
quick.
takeaway for me, outside of the character stuff, is that Lumen Technologies is got their finger in a lot more pies than I thought they did.
Yep.
Yes.
The technology that they're showing off in this episode, whether they did it purposely or inadvertently, raises a lot of possibilities about where future episodes could go. This could be like a holodeck. They could take them
Right?
anywhere to anything. Of course, it all depends whether or not you think this Dieter National Forest location is a real place or not that they went to when they stepped out of the elevator. Reminds me a little bit of that shore leave episode from the original Star Trek. And there
Yeah.
was because Milchek would just walk onto the scene from behind a tree or something like that. So too
Yeah.
bad they didn't show him going into the actual entrance point
Right.
where he came in. But yeah, this series is just hasn't missed a beat since the first season. It's getting a lot more complex and
Yep.
it's keeping us off balance. And I think in today's world where we're now like on our third, fourth generation of TV series, it's a very welcome breath of fresh air.
I
I
agree.
agree.
It does make you think, and I love that about it. Okay,
Yes.
so we don't grade these, but I would like to get a numeric value for you from 1 to 5. How surreal was this episode for you? For me, I think a 4.75 surrealness.
I can't think of anything more unexpected.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm like thinking, God, this is a 5. This is a mind F in the best way possible. We're just, and don't, I did not know Ben Stiller was involved with this somehow.
Oh, yeah.
He's the one that directed this. And
Mhm.
I have not done a deep dive yet because I'm worried there might be spoilers, but like, how the hell did he come up with this? And what was the motivation
Well,
of
he didn't
doing?
come up with it, but he did.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
why did he make a decision that he wanted to be behind the scenes of something so crazy
Yeah.
Yeah, and different from anything he's been involved with.
different?
He's apparently a very big Star Trek fan.
Yeah, he is my
He's
fan.
got some pretty expensive memorabilia. I keep wondering if he's ever going to appear before the camera.
That would, if
So
it's just a voice or something, that would be
I've
cool.
I've wondered about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's done a little bit of sci-fi in a weird comedic way,
Hmm.
but that movie that he did where they were all mystery men, is that what it's called? Where
Yep.
they were all superheroes, like B or C quality superheroes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that covers everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wrap it up there. I wish we had some feedback from anybody who's listening. Let me just say you can email us at jklmediareviews@gmail.com, and we'd love to get feedback from you. You can also give feedback on our YouTube page, which is JKL Media Reviews there. And you can reach me at Aliveria on social media and my blog.com. So you go next, Jesse.
So I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter, X, Jesse Jackson on Facebook, and I continue to talk music on Set Listing Bruce, where I talk to people from around the world about the power and magic of music, and Perfectly Good Podcast, where we're going through every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. Shout out to Sylvan. I hope she's listening to this. And how about you, Karen?
I already said mine.
Okay, good.
How about
Lou, yes, sorry.
Yes, you can find us this podcast on the YouTube at JKL Media Reviews, and you can find me on Twitter at Lou W Sitzma or Blue Sky at the same handle, as well as my YouTube channel Lou's Reviews, where we have just completed our Babylon 5 journey, and we ended that off with the animated movie, The Long Road Home. If you're a B5 fan, you want to check that out. We did all 5 seasons. We did 1 or 2 of the movies. We haven't done all the movies. Maybe we'll do them in the future, maybe not. But you'll also find that I do writer interviews as well as a Stephen King podcast. And that's about it.
All right, great. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to you guys. Thank you for listening and hang in there, as Irving says to Dylan at the end of the sets. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Hey.
And
Scene.
the proceeding has been a JKL Media production.